"Don't drink that, sir." The little girl's fingers wrapped around Edward Whitmore's wrist half a second before the champagne touched his lips. Crystal chandeliers glowed above them. A string quartet played somewhere behind the applause. For one impossible moment, the richest man in the room and the poorest child in the room stood frozen together. Then something slipped from the girl's pocket and landed against the marble floor with a sharp metallic click. A diamond ring. And the smile on Edward's fiancée's face vanished. 3 hours earlier, the Whitmore estate looked like something from a magazine cover. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Valets hurried through the evening air. White roses climbed every archway leading to the ballroom where hundreds of guests would soon celebrate one of the most anticipated engagements in New England. Maya Brooks stood near the service entrance holding a plastic container of leftovers her mother had packed that morning. The container was cracked along one side and secured with 2 strips of tape. She adjusted it carefully beneath her arm before stepping inside. The smell hit her first. Expensive perfume, fresh flowers, polished wood. Everything smelled rich. Everything looked rich. The estate seemed like a different planet from the apartment she shared with her mother. Earlier that week, Maya had watched her mother stare silently at a hospital bill spread across their kitchen table. The number printed at the bottom had stayed there long after the food was gone. Long after the lights were turned off. Long after her mother thought Maya was asleep. Tonight, Denise Brooks was working another event for the catering company, hoping overtime might keep the electricity from being shut off next month. Maya was only supposed to wait quietly in the employee lounge until the party ended. Instead, she found herself wandering near the back hallways of the estate. She liked looking at things she would probably never own. The giant oil paintings, the gold-framed mirrors, the grand staircase that curved like something from a movie. Then she noticed something strange. A security camera above the hallway entrance slowly rotated left. Then stopped, rotated right, then stopped again. The tiny red light blinked twice and went dark. Maya frowned. She wasn't an expert, but she knew cameras weren't supposed to go blind in the middle of a billionaire's engagement party. Before she could think much about it, voices drifted from around the corner. Adult voices. One belonged to a woman. Calm, elegant, familiar from every billboard and magazine article she'd seen recently. Vanessa Hart. Maya stepped back instinctively. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop. But then she heard something that made her stay still. "After tonight," Vanessa said softly, "everything changes." A man chuckled quietly. Maya couldn't see him. "Only if he signs first," he replied. Silence followed. Then the sound of heels clicking across marble. Maya waited several seconds before peeking around the corner. The hallway was empty. Completely empty. Except for one thing. Near the baseboard, partly hidden beneath a decorative table, something glittered under the light. Maya walked over slowly and crouched down. Her fingers closed around a diamond ring. Felt heavier than it looked. And engraved inside the band were 2 initials that definitely did not belong to Edward Whitmore. The ring felt cold in Maya's palm. Not expensive cold. Not shiny cold. Something else. The kind of cold that made her feel as though she was holding something she was never supposed to see. She glanced down the hallway once more. Empty. The voices were gone. The camera above her remained dark. Its red indicator light should have been blinking. It wasn't. Maya looked again at the engraving inside the band. H+RM. The letters were tiny but clear beneath the warm glow of the wall sconces. She knew VH had to be Vanessa Hart. Every magazine cover near the grocery checkout line seemed to have her face on it lately. But RM? That wasn't Edward Whitmore. Even Maya knew that. Footsteps suddenly echoed from the far end of the corridor. She quickly slipped the ring into the pocket of her cardigan. A catering manager hurried past carrying a tablet and barely looked at her. "There you are," he muttered. "Kids aren't supposed to wander around back here." Maya nodded and lowered her eyes. "Sorry, sir." He moved on without another word. But Maya noticed something odd. The man swiped a key card against a side door before entering. The light flashed green, then red, then green again. as if someone had disabled it and reactivated it within seconds. Maya frowned. Adults always told children not to pay attention to things that weren't their business. The problem was that sometimes nobody else seemed to be paying attention either. A few minutes later, she found her mother in the service kitchen. Denise Brooks stood beside an industrial sink stacking trays. Steam rose from giant stainless steel pots. Her tired shoulders sagged beneath her black catering uniform. "You okay, baby?" Denise asked without looking up. "Yes, ma'am." Maya hesitated. Then she almost mentioned the ring. Almost. But something stopped her. Denise already looked exhausted. Earlier that morning, Maya had seen her mother quietly remove a hospital bracelet from her purse before work. The bracelet belonged to her last emergency room visit. She thought Maya hadn't noticed. She always thought Maya didn't notice things. "Stay close tonight," Denise said softly. "When the party starts, don't wander." "Okay." Denise smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then someone called her name from across the kitchen and she hurried away. Maya slipped into a corner near the employee break room. An old television mounted high on the wall played a baseball game no one was watching. The washing machine in the adjacent laundry room hummed steadily. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. Then a phone buzzed. Not hers. A phone left charging beside a coffee station. Maya wasn't trying to look, but the screen lit up bright enough for anyone nearby to see. One text message. One name. Ryan. The preview appeared for only a second. "Running late. Make sure he signs before midnight." The screen went dark again. Maya stared at it. "Ryan. Her stomach tightened. She looked toward the hallway. Nobody seemed concerned. Nobody seemed surprised. Across the estate, guests continued arriving. Laughter drifted through the ballroom. Champagne glasses clinked together. Somewhere a violinist tuned an instrument. Everything looked perfect. But when Maya quietly checked the charging phone again moments later, the message was gone. Deleted. And taped to the back of the phone case was a small white label with 2 handwritten initials. VH. The white label on the back of the phone seemed almost harmless. The kind of thing a careful person might use so nobody misplaced it during a crowded event. But Maya knew better than to trust things just because adults made them look neat. She did not touch the phone. She only leaned close enough to read the faded ink again. Foha. The same initials inside the ring. The same woman whose smile filled the ballroom on every silver program card. Maya stepped back as a server came through the swinging door with a tray of empty glasses. For 1 second, the kitchen flooded with music from the ballroom, soft violins and polite applause. Then the door closed and the sound vanished. Maya slipped her hand into her cardigan pocket and felt the ring press against her fingers. She should have gone to her mother. She should have told someone. But the memory of the hospital bill on their kitchen table held her still. $847 after insurance. Her mother had folded it twice and hidden it beneath a jar of rice, as though folding paper could make debt smaller. Then, just as Maya turned toward the hallway, Vanessa Hart appeared at the service entrance. She was not alone. A tall man in a dark suit stood beside her, his face angled away from the security camera that still was not blinking. Vanessa's voice was quiet, sweet, almost tired. "Maya, isn't it?" Maya froze. Adults always sounded more dangerous when they remembered your name too easily. Vanessa smiled and stepped closer, the diamond on her engagement finger flashing under the kitchen light. "You found something that belongs to me." Maya did not answer. The man beside Vanessa slipped a phone into his jacket pocket too quickly, but not before Maya heard the faint sound of a deleted voicemail tone. Vanessa lowered her voice. "You're a smart girl. Smart girls know when something is not their problem." She opened a small cream-colored envelope and placed it on the steel prep table. Inside were $100 bills, crisp and flat. Maya stared at them without moving. "Your mother works hard," Vanessa said softly. "She looks tired. Hospital tired." The words landed harder than if she had shouted them. Maya's throat tightened, but her face stayed still. Vanessa slid the envelope closer. "Give me the ring. Forget what you saw, and tomorrow your mother breathes easier." For a moment, The only sound was the industrial refrigerator humming beside the wall. Somewhere beyond the door, a spoon struck the rim of a glass, light and ordinary. Maya thought of her mother wheezing in the bathroom before sunrise, trying not to wake her. She thought of the inhaler with the pharmacy sticker half peeled off. She thought of how easy it would be to take the money and pretend rich people's secrets belonged only to rich people. Then Maya closed her hand around the ring in her pocket. "No, ma'am," she whispered. Vanessa's smile did not disappear. It only became smaller. The man beside her finally turned his face enough for Maya to see the silver tie clip shaped like an M. "Children misunderstand things," he said. "Especially children who wander." Maya looked at him carefully. She knew that voice. Not from his face. From the phone. From the hallway. From the words, "Only if he signs first." Before she could speak, the ballroom doors opened at the far end of the corridor, and Edward Whitmore stepped out with 2 security men behind him. He had come looking for Vanessa, not Maya. His expression was calm, controlled, the kind of calm that made employees lower their voices. Vanessa instantly lifted the envelope off the table and tucked it beneath a folded napkin. "Edward," she said warmly, "there you are." But Edward's eyes had already moved past her. He was looking at Maya, at her clenched fist hidden in her pocket, at the cream envelope half covered on the table, and then at the man with the M-shaped tie clip who would not meet his gaze. "Is something wrong?" Edward asked. Vanessa laughed lightly. Too lightly. "Nothing at all." The little girl found a piece of costume jewelry and became confused. Maya looked up at Edward and said only one thing. "Then why? Did she offer to pay me for it?" The room went still. Edward did not accuse. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at the envelope, then at Vanessa, and for the first time that night, the billionaire's hand paused halfway to his jacket pocket as if his own certainty had betrayed him. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The catering staff pretended not to listen. The kitchen noise seemed to shrink into the distance. Even the refrigerator hum felt quieter. Edward Whitmore looked at the envelope beneath the folded napkin. Then he looked at Maya. Then at Vanessa. The silence could have gone in many directions. Vanessa chose hers first. She laughed softly, the way people laughed when correcting an innocent misunderstanding. "Edward, please." Her voice was calm enough to soothe a boardroom. "She's a child." The man with the silver M-shaped tie clip nodded. "I believe she misunderstood a gesture of kindness." He turned toward Maya with a patient smile. "Miss Brooks, Ms. Hart was concerned about your family. That's all." Maya noticed he never denied the money. He only changed what it meant. A moment later, another man entered through the service corridor. Gray-haired, expensive suit, polished shoes. Richard Cole, Edward's longtime attorney. The kind of man who spoke so carefully that people assumed he must be right. Vanessa immediately seemed relieved to see him. "Richard," she said, "perhaps you can help." Richard listened without interrupting. When Vanessa finished, he folded his hands and looked down at Maya. Not cruelly. Worse, politely. "Young lady," he said. "Sometimes adults have conversations that can seem suspicious without the full context." Maya said nothing. Richard continued. "Mr. Whitmore's family receives requests for assistance every week. Medical bills, housing problems, emergency expenses. Offering help is not unusual." The words sounded reasonable. That was the problem. Everyone nearby relaxed a little. The explanation fit neatly into the room. Maya felt herself becoming smaller inside it. Just another poor child who didn't understand how wealthy people handled things. Edward remained silent. Not because he agreed. Because he was thinking. But Maya could already see where the room wanted the story to go. The billionaire's fiancé had tried to help. The poor girl became confused. End of problem. Richard glanced toward security. "Perhaps we should return Miss Brooks to her mother and allow the evening to continue." The security supervisor stepped forward immediately. "Of course." His tone was respectful, professional, not threatening. Yet the message was clear. The important people would stay. The child would leave. Maya's fingers tightened around the ring inside her pocket. The metal pressed into her palm hard enough to hurt. Nobody asked what she had seen in the hallway. Nobody asked about the dark security camera. Nobody asked about the deleted message. The rich world wasn't shouting at her. It was quietly closing around her. "May I ask one question?" Maya said. Richard smiled politely. "Certainly. If the money was for my mom," Maya asked. "Why did Ms. Hart ask for the ring first?" Nobody answered immediately. Vanessa's smile returned. "Because it belongs to me." "Then why did you throw it away?" Maya asked. The room became still again. Not dramatic stillness. Worse, the kind that arrives when a conversation accidentally touches something real. Vanessa recovered first. "I didn't throw it away. I found it in the storm drain behind the West Garden." Maya's voice stayed calm. "Right under the camera that stopped working." Edward's eyes shifted slightly. Just slightly. But Maya saw it. He remembered something. Richard stepped in before the silence could grow. "A broken camera proves nothing." "No," Maya agreed. "It doesn't." The answer surprised him. She wasn't arguing. She wasn't trying to win. She simply reached into her cardigan pocket and slowly pulled out the ring. The diamond caught the kitchen light. For a second, everyone looked at it. Richard looked relieved. Vanessa looked nervous. Edward looked thoughtful. Then Maya turned the ring over. "I know it belongs to Ms. Hart," she said. "Because the initials say VH. Vanessa exhaled. "Too early." Maya lifted her eyes. "But if it belongs to her," she asked quietly, "why is another man's name engraved inside it?" For the first time all evening, Vanessa Hart answered too fast. "Because Ryan gave it to me years ago." The second the words left her mouth, she realized her mistake. Because nobody in that room had said the name Ryan. The mistake hung in the air longer than anyone wanted it to. Vanessa's expression barely changed, but the color beneath her makeup seemed to drain away for half a second. Richard Cole immediately stepped forward. "Ryan was a public relationship," he said smoothly. "Many people knew about it." The explanation arrived too quickly, too perfectly, like something practiced. Vanessa recovered and gave a small laugh. "Exactly. I dated Ryan Mercer years ago. There's nothing secret about that." Around them, shoulders loosened. A few staff members looked away. The room wanted the tension to end. Wealthy rooms often did. They preferred explanations over questions. Edward Whitmore, however, did not look away. He was staring at the ring. Not Vanessa. Not Maya. The ring. "May I see it?" he asked quietly. Maya nodded and placed it in his hand. The diamond caught the kitchen light again. For a long moment, Edward said nothing. His thumb moved across the inside engraving. H+RM. The letters themselves were not what bothered him. It was the wear pattern. One side of the band had been polished smooth from years of use. The other side looked newer, repaired, altered. Edward had spent decades reviewing contracts, acquisitions, signatures, and details everyone else missed. He knew when something had been changed after the fact. He turned the ring slightly. "When did you find this?" he asked Maya. "About 3 hours ago," she said. "In the storm drain." Edward nodded once. Then Maya reached into her other pocket. "There's something else." The room seemed to tighten again. Vanessa's eyes flickered toward Maya's hands. Maya carefully removed a folded piece of paper. It was damp around the edges and stained with dirt. This was inside the ring box. Richard immediately frowned. "Ring box?" Maya nodded. The ring wasn't by itself. She unfolded the paper. It was not a letter. Not exactly. It looked like part of a receipt. Torn. Water damaged. The top half missing. Edward accepted it carefully. A date remained visible. A location. A phone number. And one line that survived the damage. 2 guests. Private Harbor Cafe. Table reserved. Edward stared at it. The date was 6 weeks old. The location made his stomach tighten unexpectedly. The Harbor Cafe sat nearly 80 miles from Boston on the Maine coast. Vanessa had told him she spent that weekend in New York attending a charity conference. He remembered because he had sent flowers to her hotel. He remembered because she had called him from her room that night. Or at least she said she had. Nobody spoke. The kitchen suddenly felt very small. Edward folded the receipt once. Where exactly was this? Maya asked. Inside a little velvet box near the drain. Maya paused. The ring was underneath it. Vanessa finally stepped forward. Edward, this is ridiculous. Her voice remained composed, but something sharper had entered it. We're building a conspiracy out of trash found in a gutter. Edward looked at her. Were you in Maine 6 weeks ago? The question sounded harmless. Vanessa smiled.
No.
You know where I was?
Doi.
Edward asked softly. Silence followed. Maya watched him carefully. This was the first moment all night he had stopped defending Vanessa automatically. The first crack. Small. Barely visible. But real. Then Maya remembered something else. There was a phone number on the other side, she said. Before the paper got wet. Edward turned toward her immediately. You saw it? Maya nodded. I remember numbers well. She slowly recited the last 7 digits from memory. The moment she finished, Edward's face changed. Not dramatically. Not enough for most people to notice. But he knew that number. He had seen it before. Stored in Vanessa's contact list under a different name. And for the first time that evening, Edward found himself wondering whether the person he trusted most had been lying to him for much longer than a single night. Edward did not ask another question in the kitchen. That was what unsettled Maya most. Angry people were easy to understand. Quiet people were not. He folded the damaged receipt once more, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and thanked Maya with a nod so small most people missed it. Then he turned back toward the ballroom. Vanessa seemed relieved. Richard Cole seemed relieved. Even the man with the silver M-shaped tie clip relaxed slightly. They thought the moment had passed. They thought the billionaire had chosen dignity over suspicion. But Maya noticed something else. Edward never gave the ring back. An hour later, the engagement party continued. Music floated through the estate. Guests laughed beneath crystal chandeliers. Waiters carried silver trays through clusters of investors, politicians, and donors. From the outside, everything looked perfect again. Yet Edward Whitmore spent most of the evening listening instead of speaking. Near midnight, rain tapped softly against the ballroom windows. Beyond a side corridor, Maya sat alone in the employee lounge with a paper cup of water. An old television played a late-night weather forecast nobody watched. The vending machine hummed in the corner. For the first time all evening, the world seemed ordinary. Then Denise entered carrying a tray of empty glasses. You staying out of trouble? She asked gently. Maya smiled faintly. Trying to. Denise touched her shoulder. Whatever happens around rich people, baby, don't let it become yours. Maya looked down at the paper cup. What if somebody gets hurt? Denise paused. That's different. Maya hesitated. What if somebody is already trying? Denise studied her daughter for a second, sensing something deeper beneath the question. But before she could ask more, another staff member called her name. She hurried away. Maya watched her disappear through the swinging doors. The money Vanessa had offered could have paid the hospital bill, could have bought medication, could have bought months of peace. Yet every time Maya thought about accepting it, she remembered the security camera going dark, the deleted message, the fear that flashed across Vanessa's face when the ring appeared. Some things cost more than money. Across the estate, Edward had quietly moved into one of his private offices.
No announcement. No confrontation.
Just a locked door and a phone call. He wasn't calling the police. Not yet. He was calling the one person he trusted to tell him the truth even when he didn't want to hear it. His head of security, Daniel Mercer. I need the West Garden camera footage, Edward said. From 6 weeks ago and tonight. There was a brief pause. Sir, Daniel replied carefully. There's a problem. Edward stared out at the rain-covered lawn. What problem? More silence. Exactly 7 minutes are missing from both recordings. Edward felt something cold settle in his chest. 7 minutes. Not random. Not corruption. Removal. Deliberate. He ended the call and opened another file on his computer. Vanessa's charity conference itinerary from 6 weeks earlier. Hotel receipts. Flight confirmations. Public appearances. Everything looked legitimate until he noticed one detail buried in a reimbursement report. A mileage claim submitted by Vanessa's assistant. The destination wasn't New York. It was a private marina less than 3 miles from Harbor Cafe. Edward leaned back slowly. Outside, thunder rolled across the coastline. For years he had believed Vanessa because every document supported her story. Now, for the first time, he was beginning to wonder whether the documents had been supporting someone else's story all along. And the realization that frightened him most was not that Vanessa might have lied. It was that Richard Cole had approved every single reimbursement himself. The rain had stopped by 1 o'clock in the morning, but the estate felt colder than before. Most of the guests were gone. The ballroom lights had been dimmed. Staff moved quietly through the enormous house collecting glasses and folding table linens. From the outside, the engagement celebration appeared to be ending exactly as planned. Inside, Edward Whitmore had begun changing the rules. He did not accuse anyone. He did not cancel the party. He did not confront Vanessa. Instead, he asked for coffee. It was such a small request that nobody questioned it. 20 minutes later, Edward sat in a private sitting room overlooking the dark gardens. Vanessa sat across from him. Richard Cole stood near the fireplace. The man with the silver M-shaped tie clip had finally left, or so everyone claimed. A single security camera above the doorway blinked steadily. Recording. Maya sat quietly near the far wall in a large leather chair that seemed built for someone 3 times her size. Most adults ignored her presence. Edward noticed that too. A silver tray rested between them. On it sat 2 coffee cups and a sealed cream-colored envelope. Nobody touched the envelope. Nobody mentioned it. Edward stirred his coffee once. The spoon tapped lightly against porcelain. The sound seemed unusually loud. "Vanessa," he said gently. "Help me remember something." She smiled. "Of course. 6 weeks ago. The charity conference in New York." Vanessa nodded immediately. "What about it?" Edward leaned back. Calm. Relaxed. "Which hotel did you stay in?" Not a difficult question. Not an accusation. Just a detail. Vanessa answered without hesitation. "The Lexington Grand." Edward nodded. "And who organized transportation from the airport?" Another easy question. Vanessa paused. Only for a fraction of a second. "The event organizers, I think." Richard glanced toward the window. Maya noticed. Edward noticed too. "You think?" Edward asked. Vanessa laughed softly. "It was 6 weeks ago." "Of course." Edward smiled. Then he opened the cream-colored envelope. Inside was a printed copy of the mileage reimbursement report he had reviewed earlier. He slid it across the table. "Because according to this, your assistant drove nearly 200 miles that weekend." Vanessa looked down. For the first time all evening, she did not immediately answer. Silence filled the room. Above them, the small camera light continued blinking. Red, red, red. Maya watched Vanessa carefully. Not her face. Her hands. The fingers of her left hand had begun tapping against the armrest. Tiny movements. Nervous movements. Adults often lied with their mouths. Their hands usually told the truth. Edward never raised his voice. "Perhaps your assistant remembers differently." Vanessa looked at Richard. Just once. Very quickly. But it was enough. Then Maya spoke. "The Harbor Cafe closes at 10. Every adult in the room turned toward her. Maya lowered her eyes. "I looked it up. Nobody said anything." Maya continued. "The receipt from the ring box was printed at 10:47 p.m. Richard's expression hardened slightly. "And?" Maya looked toward Vanessa. "So somebody stayed after closing." Another silence. Edward reached into his pocket and placed a photograph on the table. A security still image Daniel Mercer had quietly pulled from a nearby marina camera. Grainy. Dark. Taken 6 weeks earlier. A woman stood near a dock beneath a hooded raincoat. The image wasn't clear enough to identify her, but the person beside her was easier to see. The man wore a distinctive silver tie clip shaped like the letter M. Nobody touched the photograph. Nobody denied what it showed. Then a phone vibrated. Once. Softly. On the table beside Richard Cole. No one moved. The screen lit up. Ryan Mercer. Incoming call. For 3 long seconds, the phone continued vibrating across the polished wood. Richard stared at it. Vanessa stared at it. Edward stared at it. Then the ringing stopped. Nobody breathed. And in that moment, Vanessa finally understood something far more dangerous than the missing footage, the receipt, or the ring. The little girl sitting quietly in the oversized chair was no longer fighting alone. Nobody reached for the phone after the call ended. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument could have. Richard Cole slowly turned the screen face down. Vanessa sat perfectly still. Too still. Even the rainwater dripping from the gutters outside seemed louder than before. Edward Whitmore remained seated, his expression unchanged. But Maya noticed something she had not seen all night. His hands. One of them was clenched beneath the table. Not in anger, in restraint. The kind of restraint people use when they are afraid of what they already know. Then Maya remembered something. Her eyes widened slightly. Wait! Every head turned toward her. She slipped off the oversized chair and reached into her cardigan pocket. Not the pocket where she had kept the ring. The other one. The smaller pocket. I forgot. Her voice was quiet. There was something under the box. Vanessa's face changed immediately. Just a flicker. Barely visible. But real. Maya unfolded a tiny square of paper she had nearly thrown away. Earlier because it looked ruined by rain. I couldn't read it before. She handed it to Edward. The paper contained only a string of numbers. No names.
No explanación.
Richard relaxed slightly. That proves nothing. But Edward's eyes never left the page. Because he recognized the format instantly. Offshore account numbers. Years ago, during a corporate fraud investigation, he had reviewed hundreds of them. These numbers belonged to a foreign account. The room became quiet again. Edward looked toward Daniel Mercer, who had entered silently a few minutes earlier. Run it. Daniel nodded and stepped outside with the paper. Nobody spoke while they waited. Somewhere deeper inside the estate, a grandfather clock chimed twice. 2 o'clock in the morning. Maya watched Vanessa carefully. The woman who had spent months charming investors, politicians, reporters, and charity boards now looked at the closed office door every few seconds. Not at Edward. Not at Richard. The door. Like someone waiting for bad news to arrive. 23 minutes later, Daniel returned. He carried a tablet. He did not sit down. Sir. His voice sounded different. Edward accepted the tablet. The screen displayed bank records. Transfers. Dates. Amounts. Millions of dollars moving through shell companies. Offshore trusts. Private holding accounts. Edward scrolled slowly. Then stopped. His face lost color. One transfer had been scheduled for 48 hours after the wedding. Another was tied directly to a revised inheritance structure prepared by Richard Cole's office. And another led to an account controlled by Ryan Mercer. Nobody said anything. The evidence spoke clearly enough. But there was more. Daniel reached into a folder and removed a flash drive. We recovered deleted data from the damaged security system, he said quietly. Vanessa closed her eyes. Only for a second. Daniel inserted the drive into the tablet. Grainy footage appeared. The West Garden. Rain falling. The storm drain. Vanessa standing beside Ryan Mercer. The timestamp matched the night of the Harbor Cafe receipt. The camera had no audio at first. Then another file opened. Audio backup. Distorted. Incomplete. But understandable. Ryan's voice came first. Once the marriage paperwork is finalized, everything transfers automatically. Vanessa laughed softly. Then we won't need to wait long. Edward stopped breathing. Ryan continued. And the medication? Several seconds of static followed. Then Vanessa answered. He's already taking it. Nobody moved. Nobody looked away. The room had become a courtroom without a judge. Edward stared at the screen. His future wife. His attorney. The people he had trusted most. Planning around him. Calculating him. Counting days around his life like numbers on a calendar. Then another realization struck harder than the fraud itself. Denise Brooks had reported irregular expense records months ago. He remembered the memo now. Richard had dismissed it. Edward had never read beyond the summary. Maya's mother had tried to tell the truth, and he had allowed someone else to silence her. Edward lowered the tablet slowly. His eyes moved to Maya, the child everyone had ignored. The child who had picked up a ring because she cared more about the truth than the money offered to bury it. For a long moment he could not speak. Then he placed the flash drive carefully on the table. His voice, when it finally came, was calm enough to chill the room. "Call my attorney." The attorneys arrived before sunrise. Not Richard Cole. Different attorneys. The kind Edward Whitmore called when he needed the truth protected instead of hidden. By 7 o'clock that morning, the engagement was over. Vanessa Hart was escorted from the estate without handcuffs, without shouting, without a scene. The humiliation came from something far quieter. She was no longer being listened to. The board members who had once admired her suddenly wanted distance. The charity foundations that had placed her photograph on brochures announced internal reviews. Financial investigators began tracing the offshore accounts. Ryan Mercer disappeared before noon, which only made things worse for him. By the end of the week, federal investigators were involved. Richard Cole resigned before he could be terminated, but his resignation changed nothing. The evidence remained. The missing reimbursements, the altered records, the deleted communications. The years of trust he had converted into opportunity. For the first time in a long time, Edward did not delegate responsibility. He sat through every meeting himself, every report, every interview, every uncomfortable fact. One of those facts carried a name he could not stop thinking about. Denise Brooks. 3 days later, Edward found himself standing outside a modest apartment building on the south side of Boston.
No cameras. No reporters. No assistants.
Just a gray February afternoon and a paper bag from a neighborhood grocery store in his hand. The stairwell smelled faintly of laundry detergent and old paint. Apartment 3B had a loose number hanging slightly crooked beside the door. When Denise opened it, surprise flashed across her face. "Mr. Whitmore?" she asked. Edward glanced past her. The apartment was clean, very clean. The kind of clean that came from effort, not comfort. A small kitchen table. A couch repaired with careful stitching. A stack of unpaid medical bills tucked beneath a cookbook. He had seen billion-dollar balance sheets less revealing than that room. "May I come in?" he asked. Denise hesitated, then nodded. Maya sat at the table doing homework with a pencil worn nearly to the eraser. The old phone from the estate sat beside her. She looked up when Edward entered. "Hi, sir." Edward smiled faintly.
Maya."
For a moment nobody spoke. Then Edward placed a folder on the table. Not a check. Not a gift. Folder. Denise opened it carefully. Her eyes widened. Health insurance reinstatement through a new company program. Full payment of the hospital bills that had accumulated after administrative errors uncovered during the investigation. Legal protection for employees who reported financial misconduct. And a new position within Whitmore Global's compliance division. A real salary. Benefits. Authority. Denise looked up slowly. "You read my reports?" Edward nodded. "I should have read them months ago." The honesty in his voice made the room quiet. "I trusted the wrong people," he said, "and I ignored the right ones." Later that evening, after Edward left, snow began falling outside the apartment. Windows, soft, steady, the kind that made the city seem quieter than it really was. A new winter coat hung near the front door. The refrigerator held more food than it had in months. The kitchen light glowed warm against the gathering darkness. Maya sat at the table with a full glass of milk beside her workbook. The old phone remained nearby. She had refused to throw it away. Too many important things had begun with that phone. Edward stood outside by his car for a moment before driving home. Through the apartment window, he could see Maya laughing at something her mother had said. A simple sound. Small. Ordinary. The sort of thing powerful people often miss while chasing larger things. Then his phone vibrated. A board member asking for updates. Another crisis. Another decision. Edward looked back at the apartment one last time before silencing the call. Earlier that week, he might have answered immediately. Tonight, he didn't. Because for the first time in years, he understood something Maya had known all along. The truth rarely arrives from the loudest voice in the room. It usually comes from the person everyone else forgot to hear.